Welcome, guys. I just wanted to thank you yesterday when we started. I know everybody enjoyed the break. It was like coming back to the 13th of January when kids are starting school for the first time after December holidays. You all looked rather miserable, but now that school started, it is what it is.
It was much worse than that. There was an hospital.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're really getting into the almost spirit of somberness and depression. Um, okay,
Isn't
so
that obvious?
yeah.
Sure. Wow.
Well,
I
I
thought
heard the
Omer was saying
champagne
blur.
cork's going when
Never
we said
mind.
we're going to close for banners money. So anyway, Kevin, you want to teach us?
Yes, and on that note, you did ask me to discuss something about the Omer, so let's
Hang on, Lance,
go
I'm only
ahead, look at
reading
my
in front of
notes.
you. So if you ask a question, I'll be great at lip reading.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah, I just want Lance to alter his screen a bit because I couldn't see him. Okay, I just saw his eyebrows. Okay. Um, you don't see my eyebrows because they're blonde. All right. Go for it, Kevin.
Okay, Spirit Omer, which we've in this period now, which started from the second night of Pesach until Shavuot,
Okay.
is there are two things that it commemorates. Mainly the harvest season. The harvest is actually on Shavuot. The actual Omer actually means harvest, but the Sphira, the actual, so that's actually a joyous event, the harvest. But the actual period of Sphira to Omer, we're not supposed to experience too much joy in terms of listening to music, haircuts, shaving, and weddings and simchas, because it also commemorates the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, um, who died because of there was, I think it was not Sinat Chinam, there was no respect, mutual respect, and these were very people on a different level in terms of their knowledge, but they didn't have respect for each other, and they died tragically. So that's why we don't express or participate in joyous activities or events. And just one thing, so you count at Ma'ariv, you're supposed to count with a brocha, and you count up. So we count from 1 to 40 to 49. And just one thing, in terms of if you miss a day, if let's say, okay, so if you forget to count at night, you can count the following day without a blessing. But if let's say in the morning, let's say you forget at night, you can count the next morning, which is not a 24-hour cycle. But if a full 24-hour day is missed, you can continue also counting without a brocha. I don't want to go into, I've got a whole lot of notes here. I don't want to, let's just leave it at that. And yeah, so each week or each day represents a certain midah and refinement of midot as part of the process leading up to Shavuot, where we receive the Torah.
Good.
Can
Uh,
I ask a quick question on that?
yeah.
Why we count until 49, but why do they say we count 50?
Because by the time you have your first birthday party, you have already accumulated, it's actually your second birthday, technically. It's your second birthday. You've done 365
Mm.
days. They call it your first birthday, but you've already
Mm.
had your birthday, technically.
Like they say the 21st century, but it's actually
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
okay.
So, and also the 50th day, it's counted from the second day of Pesach, which is also a criteria. Guys, there is one thing that I'm surprised at. Jewish commentary has got so much detail on other aspects that I find it difficult that no one's actually come out with a book, because you've got Chesed B'Gevura and Gevura B'Chesed, and we're not taught with these 49 character trait improvements with the klipot of the emanations of our soul that have been disrupted by our lack of character balance, what it actually means and how to rectify it. So I'm just surprised that in all these decades there hasn't been books that have come out by Feldheim or ArtScroll that delineated each day. I'm not talking about a happy feel-go-lucky message properly. What's the difference between the different orders when you put the chesed before the gevurah or vice versa, and what it's meant to correct? There should be a daily approach to character improvement and fixing those klipot. I just haven't seen it. If any of you guys know, you must post it in the group.
There are Shirim, Gedalia Fenster. If you ever listen to any of his podcasts, he does give talks during this period on a certain midot of a certain week or day. He's
No,
done that in the
he does.
past.
But Rav Mattis Weinberg was the one that had a series every day on the nuances of what
Ah,
it meant, except that it was so complicated. I had to have a minute of patience. So I'm still working on it, and I'll go back to it. But I'm saying Gedalia Fenster deals with general themes of energy within that particular week,
yeah.
not the day specificity. All right, so guys, do you remember that Rabbi Yehuda always said that the minute you've got two witnesses that say there are 100 witnesses that they viewed in another place, he views it with suspicion. He said it can't be. The rabbis say it's not a problem because they're using the 100 more as a hyperbole, saying that we don't look at the strength of the numbers, but who came in sequence to each other, meaning who was the first set of witnesses and who was the second set of witnesses. And then we talked about exoneration, that if the judge feels that there's something fishy going on, and there's discreditation, not necessarily within the Hazama process, but with the process of contradiction of testimony, he doesn't have to, if the third set of witnesses make the grade, accept it. He can just throw it out according to certain opinions. You remember learning that. So there were two different opinions. One that said if they make the grade, they make the grade, even if the woman sought to bring two sets and they were both discredited. So we were talking about contradicting testimony versus conspiring testimony. So this 100 set of witnesses is, I don't think it's literal, it's hyperbole. We did say it could occur at a wedding, but it's pretty rare because those two would also have to be acknowledged to be seen by the 100. So, can I ask any of you, do you understand off by heart what the difference is between the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, okay, versus Rav Yossi and Rebbe? Can any of you give it back to me? And Rabbi Shimon, guys,
No, not that way. I don't think there's a single one of us that can do that.
can you give me just the basic concepts, even if you don't know who's who, or not really?
Sorry, this is
Have
like the special ed class.
Okay,
Does
that's
it have
fine.
anything to do with close relatives, Damon? That's anything to do with that?
Yeah, that was the later part. Well done. It does have to do with the fact that but this is according to all the opinions, and that is a close relative cannot testify for the plaintiff or the defendant, either for or against. And we said why against? Because surely somebody would want to defend their family member. Well, you guys obviously haven't been around dysfunctional families, where in fact you've got to be worried about your own family putting you away. And
I asked,
what?
I asked Rabbi Zaltzer, what's the limitations on the family tree? How far you still consider them family? And he said it's complicated. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you asked him and you gave him aggravation. It's not just me. Starting to take it personally. Yeah, it is complicated. There's a different relationship when it comes to reciting Kaddish, by the way. So not the same halachas apply to Kaddish as apply to the testimony of witnesses in terms of prejudice. That can even extend to cousins and aunties, etc., not within the purview of the standard Kaddish coverage, which is your closest relatives. All right, guys, let's get on with it. What I want to do is I actually want to share the screen of the Mishnah, because if you can't recite whose opinion is who, we need a bit of chazorah, but it'll take us a fraction of time, not like yesterday. We're gonna just bang out the concepts. Okay.
I don't think it's even just that. We've actually just forgotten like what this, we have to get a refresher. I mean,
No,
just
you
quickly.
absolutely have to, because the Gemara itself, firstly, is not that complicated, Gavin, once you got the Mishnah. And number two, this is one of the longest Mishnahs I've ever seen. Look, guys, look how long it is. It spans pages, 2 pages. So it's like 2 pages of Gemara. So you've got to realize it's not unreasonable.
Remember, we were focusing yesterday just to absorb this. We weren't really trying to, people that aren't firstly as good as you and as talented, as gifted, generally don't try, we don't try, what's it, not decompent, to put them into compartments. No, to put them in
Compartmentalize.
compartments by rabbis. We're focusing on the gist of it to make sure we're understanding. And I think a lot of us did get it. The problem is now to put it into compartments, which rabbi, that's quite tricky for us. And then also to remember what we actually did. Just get us going, and then I'm sure we can contribute a bit.
All right, so with pleasure, I just want to make a bit of coverage. By the way, I'm learning Bava Metzia at the moment in my own personal learning, and there's a lot of references to Rav Chia's opinion, Rav Yossi, Kova Chomes, you have Sumchus. So you've got a whole lot of comments that supersede each other, where you need about 8 different rabbis and how they hold in different Gemaras. So trust me when I tell you Makkot is easier than Bava Metzia. We haven't even gone there yet. I'm there. Okay. All right, guys.
Dave, as long as you're not lost learning Bava Metzia,
Very funny with a lost object. That's very sharp, Kevin. That's very cute. I'm trying with the acquisition part. It's also part of it. Okay. So guys, we're on, if you want to look at the source, it's 5b5 and 5b6. It spans 2K pages in the Schottenstein, and it basically covers the law of testimony. And they have bearings on 2 things, not just the law of hazama, which is the reciprocal punishment that conspiring witnesses get, but also laws regarding testimony in general. Because it says here in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 6, that's the one reference point, and that has to do with a case of a normal murderer. This has nothing to do with Hazama and Adam Zomimim in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 6. At the point where it actually has to do with Adam Zomimim is a different scriptural source. Okay, that we said, if you remember correctly, was a case in Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 15, because Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 19 says, we shall do to him as he conspired to do to his brother. But before that, it says exactly the same as it does in the Mishnah here. It's got this repeating of the word witnesses. It says, by the testimony of 2 witnesses, or by the testimony of 3 witnesses, the matter shall be established. So when it uses the term the matter shall be established, that's in regard to Adam Zomimim. But the same sentence structure of superfluous, it would seem, words of saying there's 2 witnesses or by the testimony of 3 witnesses. The problem is the Torah doesn't waste any words, so it could have just said by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. The fact that it repeats the word witnesses is coming to show that it's on the plurality that it's dealing with at the moment, and that's the issue at play. So let's just go through the general principle. By the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall the one who deserves to die be put to death. Now, whenever you see the word shall be the one who deserves to die be put to death, that's talking about a standard case of murder, okay, that are convicted by 2 or 3 witnesses. When you're talking about a case of Adam Zomimim, it says that the matter shall be established. After it's got that exact same wording, by the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. That's how we put to death the Edom Zomim. So the first case in Deuteronomy Devarim chapter 17 verse 6 is standardly for murder. Chapter 19 verse 15 has to do with the matter shall be established, but they both have exactly the same wording in the beginning, which is by the testimony of two witnesses, repeats itself and says all three witnesses. So it's mentioning the word witnesses fact. So it sets forth the minimum number of witnesses. Okay. Now, as far as monetary cases are concerned, or most cases, you do need witnesses of two, because two is believed above one. If you have one witness against a defendant, and then there's the defendant, it's a one-on-one. Guys, does it cancel itself out, or what happens in that case? What do you think?
I know you need two to convict someone.
Okay, so that's Brendan's opinion, and anybody else either share it or do not agree.
If it's monetary, one is sufficient. If it's a capital offense and it's for murder, then you need minimum of two.
Okay, that's Gavin's opinion. Anybody want to add detail to either one? Lance, Kevin, Arthur.
What about the fact that they had to, if whether out of the two witnesses, if one of them's not eligible, and that you want those type of facts?
No, but I'm pleased you brought it up. It meant you were very well awake yesterday. So what we are saying is, you cover this with Bava Metzia. We also covered it in Bava Kama, is that when you're dealing with a monetary case, it is the responsibility of the one that's trying to extract the money to provide the evidence. Otherwise, everybody would go around suing his fellow Jew or fellow human being. So in order to extract money, you have to have the evidence in order to take money away from somebody else. In other words, you have to either prove that they're damaged by witnesses, by some corroboration of evidence. So we're saying if there's one witness and then the defendant, one is not believed above another, but what we do is it's sufficient to make the defendant take a shavua, an oath, because in those days the defendant could be maybe have a propensity to not pay what he owes, but he's very scared in those days to use Hashem's name in vain in an oath. So in that case, we make him testify and take an oath to the contrary of the witness. So one witness is only established not to convict, but to force an oath to be taken by the defendant. If the defendant refuses to take it, then that witness is believed. Does that make sense? If the defendant does take it, then he is believed, because he would not use Hashem's name in vain.
Yeah.
So the question is, surely then the witness should be made to take an oath with Hashem's name. Otherwise, why be a witness? Because you've seen this even in secular movies. They say, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? So help you God, etc., etc. So there is a shavua process in terms of how it works with one and two witnesses. Obviously, there is a certain testimony that's given in terms of whether it's an oath by the witness. I think they try and avoid using Hashem's name as much as possible. So as far as I know, it might be that they get the defendant to take an oath first, since there's somebody accusing him, and the one can't automatically cancel out the other. But if the witness is prepared to take an oath as well, I don't know, I haven't got that far yet, if it's thrown out of court or if the defendant is believed, or they make the witness actually take an oath. But the point of it is, two witnesses are required for a capital case, and generally two witnesses are used in order to convict, even on a monetary case, except we can force the defendant in a position if there's one witness. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. So if the matter might be established by two witnesses, why does the Mishnah say that we need a scriptural verse to say it's established with three. Because it's supposed to draw the analogy between three and two. Just as it's obvious that three witnesses, as the Mishnah says, can discredit two witnesses through Hazama, because it's common sense that three should have more credibility than two. Okay, so two witnesses can discredit three through Hazama. So let me explain the first one in a slightly different context. Is that when you have evidence, the more evidence that prevails against a reasonable doubt, because remember, in a legal system, all they have to do is create a certain amount of reasonable doubt. So three is generally believed above two in standard cases. And it's even believed with Hazama, but Hazama isn't believed because three outweigh two, and it doesn't offer more credibility. Why is it just as credible to have two against three, or three against two with regards to Hazama, guys, compared to a standard case? Can anybody answer that?
Sorry, my concentration is not that great, but I do know what's going on here. Two outweighs with Hazama, the reciprocal guys, two sufficient, because the rule is that they believed. It's from Mount Sinai. What's it from? Moshe got it at Sinai. It's saying that the Hazama, the what's it called? Not the Hazama, the witness, the two witnesses claiming that they were out there will they overwrite three. It doesn't matter if it's 2 versus 2 or 2 versus 3. They're stronger, and they outweigh the 3.
Correct. So exactly as Gavin said, it's a rule from R Shimon, from Moshe Rabbeinu. And on what basis can two discredit 3 or even 100 for that matter? What is the overlying factor?
It has to be location. It can't be facts.
Okay, and in terms of when the proceedings happen, the one thing that we have to mention with this is the second set that testify that the first set were with them in a different location, as Gavin said, are believed. But we do have to mention when we teach this over that the Hazama, the set that convicts the Adem Zomamim and the reciprocal penalty of Hazama is applied through them is judged by the judges based on the second set of witnesses. In other words, in a standard case, 3 witnesses are generally believed more than 2 because there seems to be more credibility. Unless there's credibility with both, then they cancel each other out and the case is dismissed. In a case of Hazama, 2 is just as strong as 3, but the second set of witnesses that testify against the first set that they were with them somewhere else at the time that the alleged crime was going to take place, so that they couldn't have seen it. In that particular case, it's because they testified after the first 2 that they believed. So it's a timeline issue, Gavin, but you're 100% correct. It's just something one has to mention. So what we're learning from here is there's a general principle.
And if it's before, sorry, just let's just work through that.
Well, it can't be before, because it's only at the point, because you cannot retract testimony when the first set of witnesses have kind of checkmated themselves and said where the crime took place and when, in details, that only at that point, when the second set comes,
and the second set always comes afterwards.
Correct. I'm just saying that is the principle, that it is a second set. That's the principle.
No, I would have thought that was obvious. All right, but if it stays
no, it's obvious to you because you've been learning it all this time. But when one's explaining it to others, just remember to say it's a timeline-based second set, where it's not about the amount of witnesses, but when they testify compared to the first set, if they testify after. Whereas when it's a case of a standard case of either murder or monetary cases, that generally the majority are believed to have more credibility, unless those that have got less amounts of witnesses can corroborate the same evidence. So then majority doesn't rule unless they're at a similar level. And generally what happens is the case gets thrown out of court. Okay, so let's then just go on a second. So Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold by the story of 100. He said it's fishy. He said two sets of witnesses are not believed above 100 because it just doesn't make any sense. He said then there's obviously a plotter mixed. But what we've also got to say is those 100 might not be in one single group. They might be separated in groups according to if they were able to see each other, etc., etc. Let's go to this issue with regards to Rabbi Shimon. Okay? So when it uses the term witnesses, it's a plurality that says you can believe two just as many as three. So Rabbi Shimon says that more conclusions can be drawn from the analogy of 2 versus 3. Just as two witnesses are not executed unless both are established as zomimim, so too 3 witnesses are not executed unless all 3 are established as zomimim. If 2 of the 3 are rendered zomimim, the testimony of the entire set is discredited, but they are not punished. In other words, the defendant is not put to death, but they don't get the reciprocal penalty, even if it's at the time where the defendant was sentenced, but it's not carried out. Unless all of them are discredited, they are not punished with the reciprocal penalty. So we want to know in the Chumash, where do we know this is true even for 100? In other words, like all 100 witnesses must be discredited, each and every one of them through Hazamah, before any of them can be punished. And the Torah states in this verse in Devarim chapter 17 verse 6, this concept of witnesses by the testimony of 2 and 3 witnesses. So that's how you know. Just one thing to bear in mind is we did say there was a case if there were 2 witnesses in the west wing and 2 in the east wing and they couldn't see each other, but maybe those in the west wing were proved to have been in a different location somewhere else by a second set of witnesses, then they are given the reciprocal death penalty they wish to place against the defendant, if it's done at the time between the verdict and carrying out the sentence, and if the first set are not discredited through Hazamah by another set, then they can put the defendant to death because their testimony stands. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you understand that before we go on?
Can you just recap? I tell you, I'm actually very. I'm not like I was yesterday. So I'm just
Okay.
I've got this. I had it clearer yesterday. I'm just slightly confused. If just when it comes to the discreditation, if you got two witnesses that come and discredit only one witness out of the 3, could be 1 out of the 2 even. You said that they all have to be discredited in order for the case they all have to be discredited in order for what? For the case to be for them, sorry. Just
point.
recap that. And
Good point.
what's the difference between all let's say it's 2 witnesses. What's the difference between one being discredited or both being discredited? Just tell me sorry, I'm just getting confused at the moment.
No. I think that's a great question. So let me see if I understand your question right before I come to any sort of conclusion. Gavin's saying, what do you do with the 100? Are they separated into different sets? And
No, I'm not saying that.
What do you say?
I'm not saying that. So what I'm saying is, let's just take 3 because it's easier to work with 3. Doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3. I'm saying if all 3 are discredited, what happens? Or if 1 out of the 3 is discredited, is that enough to chuck it? What happens in those 2 scenarios? Even if it's 2, if 1's discredited, or 2, or all of them are discredited, it can even be with 100. If 1's discredited out of the 100, what happens? Or if all 100 are discredited, it's all the same question.
Okay.
What's the difference in the outcome of any of those scenarios? They're all the same.
So this was exactly my point, but it's a great question. So
sorry, I didn't know this yesterday.
I think it's a great question. So let me answer you because it's a very good question. Whether the Gemara discusses a case of 100 witnesses as an exaggeration, as a hyperbole, but it takes into account one factor. Are there multiple sets of witnesses against the defendant? We're not talking about a second set that testify that one of the sets was with them somewhere else. Just a normal case at this point. A normal case at this point. There could be multiple sets of witnesses. Are they seen as one group or are they seen as separate groups? So what we learned is if they don't see each other, they don't all have to, two people from group A don't have to see two people from group B and vice versa. It suffices that the one from each group see each other. Not all four have to see each other. So if the one from group A in the east wing sees one of them from group B in the west wing, they are clustered together as one set of four witnesses. Okay? If they cannot see each other, but they testify about the same thing, there's no second set of witnesses at this stage in terms of Zomamim. Do you get what I'm saying? But there are two sets that make primary testimony against the defendant. If they can't see each other, then they are judged as separate groups of witnesses. And I'll tell you the impact it has on your question, is that if one of them is proved to be Zomamim, and just say that one is a cluster of 3 witnesses and the other one is a cluster of 4. Whatever cluster they belong to, if you have one conspiring witness, that entire group is chucked out. It could be more than one group if they don't see each other in the respective groups. Is that clear?
So if one is found to be in Durban instead of being in Cape Town where the murder happened, just one out of any of those groups, then that group is chucked out. That whole group is chucked out.
Yeah, but not all of the groups. The group that he belongs to. So if it's all part of one group, the case is thrown out of court, but they don't get the reciprocal penalty.
Yeah, I'm just referring to a group. It doesn't matter if the group's 100, one group. I'm talking about single groups. So in a single group, if it's 100, if it's 50, if it's 10, if it's 3, if it's 2, if it's 1, I'm talking about a single group.
Yeah.
So if it's one, if only one is found
I see you, Lance. Give me 1 sec. Yeah.
If one's found to be in a different location, then the whole case is chucked out. What happens if it's just a group of 2 and both of them are found to be in a different location? Then they do get it, right?
They do get it, providing the time period is between the verdict and carrying out the sentence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but otherwise, if one of them's found, so if there's 100 and it's one group, there's 100, one group, not individual groups, one group, and one of them is discredited, the whole case is chucked out. And in order to convict them, all 100 have to be
correct.
Have to be in another. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Correct. Okay. All I'm saying is that if it's split into more groups,
yes, I do understand that.
Then each group is seen as a separate merit. That's why you could have the defendant dying on the testimony of valid witnesses, and another group that happens to be corrupt is convicted for a reciprocal death penalty for what they intended to do because they weren't there. And so too, one rotten egg does not make the entire group rotten, but the case then is dissolved. Lance had a question.
Okay, I wanted to just say what Gavin said now, because I also understood it like that if there are 100 people, they have to all be discredited, and then all of them would suffer the punishment. But if from the 100, only one of them was discredited, then the case is thrown out.
Correct.
But you also spoke about if there were, say, 5 groups of 20. Now, say one of those 5 groups of 20, they were all proven to be wrong. Is it only those 20 that get punished and the other 80 still carry on with the case?
I tell you why Lance is asking such a good question, because it means, is the case chucked out because all 20 get the reciprocal penalty if of that particular group the entire cluster is proven to be Adams or Mimim? They do get the reciprocal penalty if it's between the penalty issued to the defendant and the sentence was not carried out. However, is the case chucked out or not because there are other witnesses? The answer is no. No, it's not chucked out because there are still valid witnesses.
So those 20 get punished, the case goes forward with 80 witnesses.
Yes, correct. And each group is judged on its own merit because we did learn in a Mishnah before, how's it that the defendant can get the death penalty and a group of Adim Zomimim? If the person's innocent, they're innocent. And we said there was a group in the East Wing and the West Wing. And the West Wing group couldn't see the East Wing and vice versa, but the West Wing group was there was a group that testified against them that they were with them in a different location, so they couldn't have seen the crime. So they get convicted for and punished, that group, because they were all convicted of being Adim Zomimim. But the case proceeded with the witnesses that were still valid, and their testimony couldn't be refuted. So the defendant then was given the death sentence also. Makes sense.
I'm going on the assumption that the group is made up not only of location, but all have similar statements.
So a group has to be a minimum of two. In terms of similar statements, yes, they do. They do have to have cross testimony of witnesses. But Brendan, bear in mind that Adim Zomimim are not punished if they say that the murderer or the victim was at that particular location, and suddenly the murder victim appeared somewhere else, or the murderer was somewhere else, because that is just a contradiction of testimony against another set. Where they get the reciprocal penalty is if they couldn't have been there to witness it at all. The fact that they witnessed an apparent murderer or defendant and it never happened, okay, it's definitely thrown out of court and disregarded if another set said, but the murderer was with us in a different location, or the victim was with us in a different location, but they're not Adim Zomimim because they were at that location, because nobody can corroborate that they weren't at that location, so they don't get the reciprocal penalty. Makes sense?
Yeah.
And part of the
Thanks.
testimony of witnesses, firstly, there's two processes. I don't know how rigorous the testing is before they admit them as witnesses, or if the rigorous testimony of discounting them as witnesses occur only after they're admitted as witnesses within the court trial. It touched on it briefly in Sanhedrin and briefly in Makkos so far. But there certainly is a sort of screening or vetting process somewhere along the line at which they want to get the murderer off. Now, just bear in mind, if he didn't get warned, or he doesn't accept the warning of the consequence and the punishment and the prohibition, they give him the Bavli treatment. He doesn't get away with anything. The Sanhedrin didn't do it, but he still does get the death penalty. Okay, cool, guys. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
We'll
Thanks,
hit the
Bob.
rest of the Mishnah tomorrow, but we did good. We can't be expected to remember 2 pages of our heart. We're just hacking away at the tree at all 4.
So then why did you
Yeah.
ask us